Hello, everyone, and welcome to Office Hours. This is where we answer tech questions 24/7, at least 7 days a week. We come on and do the show, and then in the back end, there's people available who can answer your questions 24/7. Let's get right to those questions. Alexander, what do we got this morning?
First one is from Jason Robertshaw in Sarasota, Florida. Final Cut Pro 11 with magnetic mask, transcribe to captions, and spatial video editing for Apple Vision Pro. Big deal?
Alex, you're going to start us off this morning.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a big deal, but it is it's steps forward that were necessary. So I think Apple doesn't need to wow anyone with Final Cut. I think that with the Final Cut updates, I think that they're oftentimes looking at things that they need to have, they think people need to have. Spatial video, obviously, spatial video is a big reason that Apple needs to have these apps. And so being able to have the tools to render that, I think, makes a big difference. So I think that you're going to see more and more of those kinds of releases as they move forward. It's interesting that if you look at the Resolve releases and the Final Cut releases, they don't do the same things. So they're kind of two complementary apps, which I thought was really interesting. Resolve does some things that Final Cut doesn't do. Final Cut does things that Resolve doesn't do. And so they handle spatial video in a different way. I think that the viewability of spatial on the new Final Cut is better than Resolve. Resolve, you have to render it out to see it. in Final Cut, in the new Final Cut, and I haven't gotten to open it. I've just been looking at the preview, so I'm going to be opening it today. It is you can theoretically put an anaglyph glasses on and see it in red and blue, and you can sit there and play with your 3D, which is actually a really effective way for you to just kind of have a flat screen and be able to view what you're working on. So I think that's interesting as far as how Final Cut's managing that. The transcribe to captions, you kind of have to put that in at this point. Like they couldn't have gone another version without putting transcribe to captions in because everybody else has it. And I think that their implementation will probably be very simple and easy to use because that's what Apple does. And the magnetic mask, if it works, is, a lot of us would use it a lot. I'll be interested to see what the quality of the edges are. I'm going to hopefully shoot some tests today to kind of play with it a little bit with real world. I mean, we saw what they did with their footage, but I usually want to do it with my footage. So I think that could theoretically be really interesting, but we'll see how it goes. I don't know if it's a big deal, but I think that they made some solid decisions. A little underwhelming related to what they did with motion, which is almost nothing, bug fixes. So outside of that, I think that there wasn't anything that stunned everyone, but I think that the choices that they made were pretty solid.
Jeffrey Powers.
So, well, first of all, I won't speak too much on the spatial because I don't know too much about it. I would wonder if it would actually work on iPad and Mac, because if that's the case, then a lot of people are very mobile. I'm calling them the backpack streamers, where you can actually do like a multicam shoot and send it to your iPad, edit it on your iPad, send it to your desktop, edit it on your desktop, send it out type thing. So you could be on a plane, you could be shooting at location, you could be on a plane editing, and then you could be sending when you get home. So that's changing that. As for the captions, this is the problem I have. This is the problem I've had with Adobe's captions, and that is the fact that you cannot change the learning model inside of there. And a lot of times the Adobe captions are just trash. If I say on YouTube, I say Jeffrey Powers from Geekazine, it sees that. But when I do that in Adobe, I have to correct it every single time. So if it can do that type of stuff where it's words that are not common, then this will work really well and definitely be something that's going to compete with CapCut, that's going to compete with Opus and all these other AI learning systems that are coming out there. So that's going to be a really good thing. And of course, a lot of the social creators, the influencer creators will love that if they can do it on their phone, to their iPad, to their computer.
So for me, it's been a fascinating day. I've been reading and watching a lot of people that I know talk about this to see what's going on. First thing that I noticed, I was watching something with Thomas Grove Carter on YouTube, and he's one of the original really, really, really smart Final Cut editors. He's done a lot of major work that most people have seen, things like Ed Sheeran's Castle on the Hill video and things like that. So he's a top-notch editor, works out of London. And I saw a piece where he was talking about the fact that something that a lot of people are missing is that change from 10 to 11. I mean, FCP X was actually 10, it might be signaling a major change in the fact that they're restarting and going to build something out new from this. I mean, 11, if you read the tea leaves for Apple, we'll see what happens. One of the more interesting things of the speculation I've seen out there is how much they're going to link it to Apple Intelligence, which I always find interesting because, remember, Apple's going in the direction of putting this machine learning and AI stuff on chip rather than requiring you to go out onto the web to use that kind of technique and technology. And so it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, it was mentioned in a couple of videos that your work on your timeline can benefit now from artificial intelligence and machine learning and these things without exposing any of your content or data to the web. I mean, if it's going to process legitimately on your device, on your phone, nobody else has access to that and you control it, which I think might end up being pretty important as we go down the road. A lot of speculation is going to take a while. Nobody's really touching it and playing it except the first seed people who have had it for a little bit of while. And that's why I'm trying to pay attention to people like Thomas Grove Carter and others who I know have been inside. In fact, I believe that Thomas edited the Apple piece on Final Cut 10, that really tight, here's the introduction to features that are on the web right now, that you can see kind of a very quick, well-edited piece about it does this, it does that, look at this, doesn't try to explain it, just kind of outlines all the features. And for me, as someone whose business is based around Final Cut, it was pretty exciting to see if they do in turn reset this, and it is the beginning of a new era that should hopefully put the questions to rest about, are they going to dump Final Cut, and is everybody going to go to Resolve, and is it going to fall apart? I don't think that was ever a possibility, really, but that speculation has been out there for a long time. Alex, you have more thoughts?
Yeah, I think we should. I think to Bill's point, I think we can stop having the conversation about whether Final Cut and Motion and compressor and Logic are ever going to go away. They may not move as fast as a lot of us would like them to move. They may not move as fast as Resolve, which no one's moving as fast as Resolve. So, but I don't think that they are so embedded into what Apple's doing next with a lot of the spatial stuff that there's just no way they could give that up. So I don't think that if anyone's trying to figure out what's going to happen for the next 5 years, in 5 years we'll still be talking about some solid but conservative updates to Final Cut, Motion, Compressor, and Logic. And I think that we can keep on expecting kind of a slow and steady pace of them adding those things. I do think we will see more and more spatial stuff added because Apple really needs to make sure that they have a tool that can provide things for the headset, although I think that Blackmagic is taking some of that pressure off by going down the Resolve path, and hopefully in future versions, it's a little basic right now, but I think that that's going to help a lot as far as being able to manage some of those things.
It's also interesting to me that video editing is now such a common task. I mean, literally, it's gone out of production suites and into almost everybody's living room, bedroom, phones, whatever. So many people are using video to communicate now that having tools that are still incredibly fast, and it's super easy to put out really good-looking stuff. I was interested in a thread. Somebody was talking about color correction, and I was realizing the last 2 or 3 things that I've shot on my phone, I never had to color correct any of them. The computational photography in those was acceptable for my purposes. That's not saying that somebody else shouldn't be valuing color correction hugely, but the default out of my phone has been so solid for general communications that I think there's going to be less emphasis on that. Alex, you wanted to dive in?
I will say that I think that there's a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that if I need to do color correction, I use Resolve. So if so the thing is, if I'm going to start this project, and if I'm going, I got to do a lot of heavy color. If I need to tweak a couple things, I'm going to do it in Final Cut because it's really nice and fast, and I can just knock it out. If this is going to need critical color work, critical audio work, that type of thing, I just start the project in Resolve. But I would say that I'm still half and half. Half my projects, I just need to clip things together and export them, and in that, and can do some fairly detailed things if I need to around the edit. And in those cases, multicam, I know that Resolve does multicam. I think that Final Cut multicam is better. Just easier to use quickly. So I think that those are. So I think that with all of those, you choose between the two, and it does the announcements from 19.2 and Final Cut, I do feel like they are becoming complementary applications. It's a really interesting thing. It feels like I have no idea if the teams talk to each other, but it sure feels like it. It's like, you take this, I'll take this, we'll go down this path. And so that's how that feels, I think, right now. I think that the spatial had to happen. The transcriptions had to happen, or the automatic transcriptions had to happen. The matting is not something that I would have requested, but I have to say, in most cases, with my expectation of what I expect Final Cut to do, I usually don't have that many requests. I have a lot of requests for Motion, but I don't have as many requests for Final Cut. Because I just, it does what I need it to do. And I guess if someone was embedded in Final Cut, they probably have more requests. But I just feel I have a place to go, which is Resolve, to fix the things that I don't have in Final Cut.
Yeah, it's also interesting. The other two things that I read about a lot last night was the links between Final Cut and Apple Intelligence, and the ability not just to do the magic masking, which is one reflection of AI put into the actual app itself, but the possibilities for all of that stuff as we're going forward. And I heard a couple of people talk about there was some substantial rewriting under the hood for exactly that purpose, to make it so that you weren't bolting on something, but integrating it into the deep core of the code for Final Cut. If they did in truth spend a lot of time revamping it for look at the advances they're making in Apple Silicon and the rest of that, maybe that portends even faster, quick access to some very sophisticated things like they implement with Magic.
I think that you're exactly right. That I think there's probably a lot of work being done to make sure they're taking full advantage of the Apple hardware. That's one of the advantages of being owned by Apple. And I bet you that Final Cut, the new Final Cut, will run very well on an M4 Mac Mini. And Apple at some point will talk about it. Because it's what we've seen is, especially from Apple, but also from Zoom, when you really write natively to the hardware, you get incredible performance out of these little pieces of hardware. I could imagine doing really heavy things on a Mac Mini and having a very low load on the computer, because it's taking full advantage of all the efficiency cores and the CPUs and GPUs together. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing to test as we move forward.
And that also means that if the M4 is powering that, you can get them in laptops, you can get them in desktops, you can get them in small form factor like the minis. So it just means that their whole ecosystem is going to get faster and quicker if you're compatible with everything across the thing. We're going to be talking about this for a while, as everybody just learned about it yesterday. But let's go on to our next question now.
Bobby Rafferty in Central Florida is asking, Apple Motion had an update. What do you think of the 3D and 360-degree features?
Alex?
I don't think any of those features are new. So those have been around for a while. I do a lot of 3D titling, and I do a lot of some of the 3D work there. So being able to use USDZ, being able to work inside of 360 environments, being able to do the 3D text, all the things that they show on that website are pretty much have been in motion for years. So those aren't new. I think they added bug updates to Motion. I think that's all they did. I don't think that there was a lot, and it doesn't mean that they won't add something in the future. Maybe things were just ready to release, but in there wasn't a lot of additions to Motion. But it's a very powerful app. I use it regularly. I still think that Motion is probably one of the best bangs for your buck at $50. I mean, at $50 or if you're an educator, as part of a $200. For $200, educators and students can get Final Cut, Motion, Logic, like all of those, compressor, all of those together. It's a pretty good deal. And you get to keep it forever, whether you're a student or not. Like, you just need to be a student for a quarter, as long as you get to do that. So it's a pretty great product for the price. And again, I use it for all my countdown clocks. I use it for a variety of other animations. It's something that I sometimes go to After Effects for some things, but I would say that I used to go to After Effects for some things. Most of the time, if it's heavier than Motion, I'm now going to Resolve, to Fusion inside of Resolve to do those things. And so I think that it's a really solid app for what it is, but there wasn't any updates. All that stuff you see on the website have been around for a while.
Next question.
Brett Below in Appleton, Wisconsin is asking, what is your workflow for creating a garbage mat for an Ultimatte 12 HD? Any special tips, tricks, or tools to share?
Alex, I know nothing about this. Do you have some insight?
Yeah. So the main thing is that there's I don't know if you could do what we do in software with hardware to do this. So what a garbage mat is it's a mat that can be supplied to Ultimatte it can be an external source, so it could theoretically be animated or other things like that. But what happens is that you have a green screen, but you have some C-stands and you have some lights and you have something else sitting there, and you don't want it to try to key that. So what you do is you can put in either a garbage mat, which is going to just say make that make that transparent. Like, don't try to key that. Just wherever the garbage mat is, make that transparent. That might be part of a table. It might be, again, C-stands and lights, those types of things. You can also have holdout mats, and holdout mats go the other way. It says, don't worry about the key, make this opaque. So instead of being transparent. So a holdout mat will hold things in, and the Ultimatte has both of those things available to it. The thing that we do in software, and you would probably need 2 Ultimattes to do this. By the way, you could probably use a cheaper one to do this. Is I'm going to do this on Bill, but I'm going to ask Bill to be kind of still here for a second so I can show something. So if we're keying Bill, let's say Bill was in front of green screen, so here's Bill, and if he's in front of green screen here, what I would do is I want to build 2 mats. So you key it, you'd key this. You'd key this mat here. This is the mat, right? That would go around Bill, and almost anything, any green screen I can key, but I'd key it really hard. So I would make it really black or white. Then what we do is we expand it. We do an expand on the key, and we get this outer edge. And what we call this is it's a procedural or dynamic garbage mat. So what it does is it says I pushed it really hard because all I care about are these edges here, And so what I do is I push it, I expand it out. And it makes all of this transparent out here. And I'm now only keying this little area. So any kind of fall off or anything else doesn't matter. Now, the other thing that we do is we then say contract the mat and make that the holdout mat. So this is the holdout mat here. And we contract it and we knock that out. So all of this is now totally opaque. So these are 2 different mats that are being generated there. And so now the only part that you have to worry about is instead of worrying about the entire, his shirt and everything else and the background, I'm only worried about this area here around him. And that's going to allow me to build a much more precision app because the only thing that really matters are edges. Everything else is relatively easy. So that's what we build there, but you would need 3 Ultimattes to do that, I think. And I don't even know if they would have enough. We do that in software to make that happen. And we can do it in real time in software. The program that I had called Conduit did that there, and we could probably build that into some kind of software tool. But that's what garbage and holdout mats do. The ones that I think that are available for Ultimatte as an input with just one Ultimatte there would most likely just be something that you're masking out. You're drawing something and masking it out so that you don't have to deal with the C-stands. But that's the more advanced version of that.
That was fun. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Paul Wall, who's in Austin, Texas. Discuss the newly released Final Cut camera and what phones it will work on, 15 and 16 Pro only.
Jesse Kester, start us off.
All right, let's take a look at what we're talking about, and then we'll talk about what we're looking at. So Apple has released a camera for Final Cut 11. Just gives you more control over your camera. It gives you LUTs and things like that and better integration into the Final Cut pipeline. It's all well and good. My concern is that when companies release multiple camera apps, however many there are will get tossed by the wayside as they focus on the one that requires the most focus or gets the most interaction. And when you see a camera like this, you just wonder, in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, are they still going to be supporting it, updating it, pushing it forward? Will it have become integrated into other software? So it's cool, useful, great, but will the support continue over the years?
Alex.
I think it was almost necessary for them to build this app. And the reason for that is that I think that the base app, the one that's the consumer version of what comes with the camera, has gotten to be as complex as it possibly should be. It's probably more complex than it should be. But you still have people going to the Blackmagic camera or other cameras to Kilo is another one that's a good camera that's come out. But I think that the reason people are going to those is they need these higher end tools, the LUTs, they need ISO control, they need all these other things that are there. And I think that Apple could see that and wants to make sure that they can develop those as well. I also think that the reason that we may see the app is I think that Apple is still, I don't know if they're still using it. For their first keynotes that they did, they were using the Blackmagic camera. I wouldn't be surprised if this camera doesn't become kind of the keynote for Apple. Like Keynote, the presentation app was Apple's Keynote app. Like they wrote an app because they didn't like PowerPoint. And so it was, and then they made it something there. And I think that they're probably going to end up dogfooding this with their keynotes. And the keynote is probably driven by those teams and some of their production teams of what features do you need. And they don't need all the features, but they need some of the features, and they need this and that. So I think that it most likely will be around for a while. When you see what they're putting in, they're really putting in the film needs. If you wanted to shoot your keynote with a phone, these are the things that the buttons and the dials that you need to do that. One thing to keep in mind with compressor with this is that they keep talking about 4K 120. You want to keep your eye on 4K 120 because 4K 120 is really something that Apple is not just talking about slow motion. It talks about it here, and everyone thinks about 120 as slow motion. But remember that a lot of Apple's devices, or almost all of Apple's devices, can deliver 120 frames a second as it is, and it is a much different feel for motion if you take 120 and then you watch it at 120, especially on a headset. So I would keep your eye on the 120 frame per second solutions that are kind of hidden in a lot of these releases.
And if you look on the Apple page for Final Cut Camera, you will see this, and you will note that in a lot of the cases, the first and second bullets for sure, requires iPhone 15 Pro or later. Doesn't mean it'll only work on iPhone 15 Pro or later, but what happens is as you get those faster processors and more integration with things like Apple Intelligence, it unlocks features in your phone that you wouldn't have if you didn't have better hardware for it. So it's not you can't do any of this. It's that all the things in Final Cut Camera will work for everything except features that require this new processing. And then those are restricted to the people who have the processors that do the processing. I think that's how it works. Next question.
This question is from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. For a 2022 Mac Studio M1 chip with Thunderbolt 4 ports, which is the better choice for a fast 4 terabyte storage expansion? OWC Envoy Pro FX Thunderbolt or OWC Envoy Ultra Thunderbolt? Is there better for similar money, $500 to $600? Drive speed is key here. Alexander Knight, start us off. Yeah, so if you're talking about drive speed and total throughput being the most important feature, the obvious answer would be the newer Envoy Ultra because that supports the latest Thunderbolt 5 protocol. However, that M1 chip does not support Thunderbolt 5. So you don't have Thunderbolt 5 enabled ports on that. So you're not going to see that speed. It'll be limited to whatever bus throughput that Thunderbolt 4 is going to give you, which is 40 gigabits per second. But if you want something future-proof, it probably wouldn't hurt to buy the faster drive with the eventuality that you will be upgrading to an M4, or an M4 Pro chip, which would support Thunderbolt 5. So that might be the way to go. Jeffrey Powers.
The only thing that concerns me about that Ultra is, and I might be wrong because I'm not seeing it in the pictures, is that cable detachable? Or is that attached right onto the drive? I cower away from any type of drives that have cables like that because if the cable dies, your drive dies, and you have to figure out how to get that data off of that drive. Whereas the other one, yes, the whole Thunderbolt 5 versus Thunderbolt 4, it says that with Thunderbolt 5 it can do 6,000 megabits per second, and whereas the other one is 2,800. So yeah, just as Alexander said, if you're planning to do the upgrade and you want to keep that drive for a little bit longer and you want to switch to Thunderbolt 5 within the next 2 years, then you might want to look at the Ultra. Otherwise, save yourself some cash and then do the upgrade to Thunderbolt 5 when you absolutely need it.
I think there's a lot of resonance to what you just said. For me, I've been using an Envoy Express for a long time for some of the transmission between the voice booth and here and other things. And they really built a really stable thing. That does not feel like it's coming out. Now, if you're traveling a lot and plugging and unplugging constantly, I would be concerned about that. And I think Jeffrey's right about that. But for me, the build quality of the OWC things I've used, the last thing I've worried about is the cable. I was just noticing both that and the integrated cable on my mini dock both feel like they've been well engineered, so it's not going to be particularly fragile, but I get his point. And if you do mess up the cable, it's an issue. Next question.
John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania is asking, I have 8 or 10 G-Tech 2 gigabyte Firewire 800 drives. The data can be erased. Could they be repurposed for general use? Is it worth it? What do panelists do with old drives such as these?
Jesse Kester?
Call the Smithsonian. It's time to retire them. Even if you have a working computer that you can plug Firewire 800 into, I would not be trusting those drives to spin up properly anymore. Replace them, and storage is so cheap, it'll be a drop in the bucket compared to the risk of continuing to run drives that old.
Alex Lindsay?
Yeah, if there's nothing else you need for them. I mean, you could use them for, I don't know, a software key or something like that. I mean, that'd be about all you could put on them at this point. For $15, you can get, I think, either 32 or 64 gigabytes on a USB, key, so that you put on your keychain. So these are definitely past their prime. So there's nothing I would do there other than maybe disassemble it, take pictures, use it as a museum piece, pull it out. That's all you really have. That's all that they're useful for at this point.
Yeah, do the responsible thing and try to recycle them, because there's a lot of stuff in there that you don't want in the environment. But yeah, it's Firewire 800. Boy, that used to be the new thing.
And definitely don't hand them to anyone that's making spatulas. Have you seen this whole thing about the spatulas?
Yeah, we got rid of them all a month ago, black spatulas.
I'm in the process of getting rid of all my black spatulas because I guess they use computer parts computer parts laced with chemicals are being used to recycle. This is not like a fringe internet thing. This is like NPR. You got to stop using black utensils. And so, because they're mixing all these computer parts into it, and they said it's leaching into your food.
And the problem is you cannot tell. You might have 3 black utensils, and 2 of them will have these rogue bad for you chemicals.
I just can imagine these Amazon resellers are just going, "Oh my gosh, I have this huge warehouse full of black utensils."
Right. You have to figure out how to recycle those, because that's going to be ugly. And the problem is that when it comes in contact with heat, those chemicals can leach out. That's what you're doing. You're cooking.
What you're doing with it. Yeah, exactly. You're doing the one thing. It's fine as long as you don't do the one thing that you use it for, and then you're in trouble. So,
Jeffrey
this
Powers.
week in spatulas.
Spatula City. That's one of my favorite movies right there. Anyway, so if it was all the question whether we're talking about 2 gigabyte drives or 2 terabyte drives, and I don't think there was 2 terabyte drives in the Firewire days.
Yeah, no, I think it's 2 gigabytes.
Sure.
It's 2 gigabytes.
However, either way, I would see if there's any company, any educational resource that is looking for something that can do that. You could take them out.
I wouldn't even give it. I wouldn't even give it to someone for education. Like, that would just be you're setting them up for failure. I mean, 2 gigs is nothing. Like, there's nothing.
It is nothing. It is nothing. But
nothing there.
Once again, you could check it out. You can take them apart and definitely try and repurpose them that way. But keep in mind, they're pretty old drives. So whatever you put on, make sure it's throwaway, because if they die, you might not be able to get that information back.
Good point. Alexander, you wanted to come back in on this?
For years I've hung on to my Mac, my lovely I have 2 of them, Cheese Grater Pro Mac Pros, upgraded them, did mods, and tried to hang on to them like dear life. And sometimes you just have to let things go because it's too old.
Yeah, things do get to the end of the life, although I'm hanging on to my original 128K Mac until I'm gone. So just want to let you know that. Next question.
This one is from the QR code Robert White in Jacksonville, Florida. One of the things I loved about the M1 Mac Mini is that it was nearly silent under load. Is the M4 Mac Mini as quiet under load as the M1 version?
Alexander Knight, what do you think?
I haven't seen any stress tests yet on YouTube. Maybe somebody has done that yet. But from what I've heard from initial thoughts of people that just got them, started messing with them, is that they are quite quiet. It's more of the same thing. I'm sure you will probably hear the fans if you tried to render something in Blender or something like that. But from what I'm hearing so far, it's more of the same thing.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, Jason has one, and he hasn't talked. He has talked in some of the shows already about how quiet it is. So I don't have one yet. I'm working on which one to get for some tests that we're doing, but I think that they look promising.
There you go. Let's. Before we move on to the next question, just a reminder: your votes do count. We have quite a few questions in the queue, but your votes on them. So if you're in the Mukana interface, if you've gone down that rabbit hole and looked at officehours.global and followed it to become kind of a little closer to the show by being in the Mukana interface, your votes will make a difference still. So if you're a voting member, I guess I could call it that, make sure that you express your will on these questions so we make sure we get to the ones that are most important to you faster and spend more time on them. That said, let's dive into our next question.
From the QR code, Alex Jacobs in Oswego, Illinois. I'm looking for solutions to live captioning for on-site use. I've seen options from using subtitles in PowerPoint as a key source to web services that can send to attendee devices. I'm wondering what experience you all may have.
Alex, what's your thought?
Yeah, you can hack a lot of things. Google, PowerPoint, or Teams, or Google Meet will all do these kind of build something that you can use. Even Zoom will do it, so that you can do something that's kind of automatic there. But those are not usually what's used in these kinds of events. The two most popular ones that are used are one's called StreamText. This is streamtext.net. And streamtext is what we've seen over and over again. It is built to do exactly what you're talking about. So it can also, someone can caption to streamtext, and then from there send it to YouTube, send it to other services, send it out. There's a lot of different things that can be done with streamtext, and so it can be a web interface. A lot of captioners, if they're using, this will work with AI as well as manual captioning. The captioners will oftentimes have two outputs from their Eclipse or ProCap or whatever machine that they're using to do that, or whatever services they're using to do that. And they'll have two outputs, and one might go into the caption system, and then another one oftentimes will go out to StreamText, streaming this information. And what happens is they have a web page that's configurable. So when it's getting that live footage, whether it's AI or a person, it can go full screen, just fill up a screen. And so what we've done, I think the most rooms that we've supported with StreamText is probably 20. So 20 rooms at one time at a conference. And what we do is we took little Chromecasts and we just put them in the back of all the monitors. And then we give them the URLs for their room. And then as the person captions it, it's showing up as an in-room screen. So that is cart is what we call it for that. So the cart displays are in there, and those are all we've driven them for pretty large conferences with little Chromecasts and web pages. And so StreamText is what we've used for a lot of these things. The other one is AI Media has a lot of tools as well. So AI Media bought EEG. EEG builds the hardware that will do this. AI Media does the software, and they I don't know whether they merged or AI Media bought EEG, but that's the kind of the industrial level version of this, where you have a lot of the broadcasters, EEGs, 492s, and a variety of other things are very, very popular in that process. And so those are the ones that those are the ones when you're really talking about, I want stuff on a screen, I want total control of how it looks. I would look at streamtext.net first, and then AI Media. David Brady also mentions Enco, which I haven't used. Enco.com/products and caption. So those are another ones for live events. So check out that as well.
Next question.
Eric Hurst in Hartford, Connecticut. Can AWS Link to MediaConnect via Zixi be configured for low latency via FEC rather than ARQ? How low can it go?
Alex?
I don't think so. A, I don't think it can, and B, I don't think that's the right use for the link. So there's other tools that you may use, that you may want to use for those low latency connections. And so I don't think that I don't think you can configure it. You can't really configure the links to do anything other than the basic, like I have a video and there's some basic do I pair two links together? Do I, so there's not much granularity because it's just designed to be a contribution tool to the cloud. And I don't think that AWS is, going to, they're not going to assume that you want low latency because you still got to go through the Media Live and MediaConnect. And so I think that wouldn't necessarily be the case. I'm going to keep coming back to, I'm not sure when we're talking about contribution to MediaConnect that we should be really talking about how low can we go. Anything over, and I will say that I still believe that for 99, not 100, but for 99% of the events out there, anything over 250 milliseconds can be whatever it wants to be. Anything, it probably should be under 20 or 30 seconds. But after that, latency just doesn't matter. And so I just don't think that, because it's just, we spend so much time. And the problem is that when people try to get under 5 seconds of latency, what we see is massive drops in stability for the user. And so you just have these because you're taking away all the buffer that you had before, and we're running after something that almost never makes any difference. And people have become obsessed with this because of bad chat tools. And so they become obsessed with this idea of getting low latency. And I know that in our industry, it's become this thing like, oh, you got to have low latency, and you've got, these partial, downloads inside of HLS, and it's just not, I don't think it's worth it. And I do this all the time, and I think that I spend a lot of time talking about latency, but for me, I'm trying to go from 250 milliseconds of latency to 80 milliseconds of latency. I'm not trying to get from, if I'm not at 250, not interested. Let's make it as stable as we can and make sure that everyone has a great experience. And so I don't think I would do it even if they could.
What's wrong with asking, I want absolutely no latency and I want to access content from all over the planet?
You can. Hey, if you got the money, you put the switch into everything and you're off, Bob's your uncle.
Well, there's got to be some latency at some point going somewhere unless you can control the entire pathway.
The latency, the IP latency, there's always some latency. So IP latency from like San Francisco to LA is about 17 milliseconds. From San Francisco to New York is about 42 milliseconds. From Beijing to New York is about 340 milliseconds. And so there's always there's physics that are there. This fiber generally, I believe, if I'm correct, runs at about 1/6 of the speed of light. So there's still some room to grow, in there, but then still going through connections and so on and so forth. So those are the issues.
Next question.
From Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Tomorrow will be a week with Mac Mini M4. Anything jumping out at panel members?
Alexander?
I thought about buying one, but then I realized I won't touch macOS Sequoia with a 10-foot pole. I'm surprised a lot of people here have been jumping on that thing because there's a lot of professional software and hardware that just is not ready for prime times, not supported. Avid Pro Tools not supported, which I use. A lot of audio interfaces and companies that make audio hardware have no driver support for macOS Sequoia yet. Dante Virtual Sound Card not supported. So a lot of stuff still needs to be tested, and it's probably going to be a couple more months before stuff is really fully supported.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, I have Sequoia on one of my machines and is running fine. But as Alex said, there's a lot of things that aren't working properly. But I felt like I needed to be able to see some of the new tools, and so I've downloaded it there and started to play with it. So I think that it's. I haven't played with the M4 yet. I'm looking at buying. I'm in this cross section of to me, there's two M4s, not 4 or 8 or whatever. There's the low end one that's $599. That's that does most of the stuff, or the high end one that has all the things in it. The ones in between don't mean anything to me. So I'm just kind of trying to figure out which end I'm going to try to grab onto. But hopefully in the next couple of weeks I'll figure it out. But so far most of the response has been that it's an amazing little piece of machinery.
And, of course, people in our community like Jason Bass, who support a lot of machines and things like that, have jumped on that real quick, and they're trying to test it out to make sure so that they're ahead of the curve. I know Jason has a lot of support clients that will eventually be moving here, and quite sensibly, he wants to get ahead of everything and really know how it operates. So check out when he's on the panel, and I'm sure he'll have some increasing opinions as he spends more time with it. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, is it worth it buying Resolve Studio from the Mac App Store, or is it better to buy from Blackmagic Design directly?
Alexander Knight.
I want to say something that involves an expletive, but I will say no. please don't buy it direct from the Mac App Store. There are a lot of limitations with which have to do with certain codecs and a lot of other stuff. One thing, the most obvious thing, Resolve is being updated at a breakneck pace. If you buy direct from the App Store, it has to go through the gatekeeper of Apple, and it has to be reviewed, and it can take quite a bit of time. So updates are going to be very slow through the App Store. From what I saw when I was trying to find out the differences is that, and this is really important, it appears that the Mac App Store version does not do hardware decoding and encoding for H.264, 265, and Apple ProRes. That's a big deal. That is really, if you've got Apple Silicon processors, that is really going to slow down the workflow and how long it takes for you to get stuff in and out of Resolve. So I would not use it. Alex
Lindsay?
Yeah, I will 100% agree with Alex that I would not use it. So it is. I generally prefer, if I can, to buy apps on the Mac App Store, and the reason I do is because generally it means that they update very quickly and easily. If I go to a new computer, I can put them all on. I can do all the things that I like to do quickly, and I don't have to figure out where the serial numbers were or where the whatever it is. And so I love the Mac App Store. And this is the one of a couple apps that I will not buy on the Mac App Store, and I have. so I have it I bought it on the Mac App Store thinking it would help, and it was broken. And I was like, "Why is it broken?" It's just broken. It's broken on the Mac App Store. Don't buy it. You have to buy it. You have to download it individually. It's fine.
Next question.
From the QR code, James Babbitt in San Diego, California. The MacBreak Weekly show on TWiT looks great. Is there a past office hours show that discusses the hardware and software that Leo uses in his home studio?
Alexander Knight raised his hand first, and then Alex.
I think it's been mentioned in passing, but Leo has publicly said on that show quite a few times that they are using, now if I'm not mistaken, I think he's got a Sony FX30 as his main camera. And they're using eCam to cut the show, and I believe his producer Bonito remotes in using Tailscale to control eCam, and so that's how they're doing that. And I think they're using Zoom ISO as well. So that's what I know.
As someone on Leo's panel and lot, Alex Lindsay, take it away.
Yeah, it's an FX30. He's got a desk with some lights all attached to it. I think that what might be kind of fun with this question, I'll talk to Leo and find out what might work for him. Maybe, Leo only lives maybe a half an hour from my house. Maybe we do like a session like a special session where we just go over to Leo's, gives us a tour.
Fun.
That'd be fun. So let me see if we can figure that out.
All right. Next question.
Rajan Chandale in Los Angeles. What AI tools in Final Cut Pro 11 are most exciting?
Alex, your opinions?
It depends. There's two big AI tools. If you're really into transcripts, then the transcript one is the most exciting. If you're really into matting, creating new mats that are intelligent, then the new matting tools are intelligent. The magnetic, what is it called? The magnetic mat or the magnetic something special, amazing, the best ever. So anyway, I think that's those are the two big ones, and it just depends on what you're doing in Final Cut.
And the most exciting to me is the fact that it's processing all that AI stuff on your machine. So it's not having to go out to a central computer system to do all of that, exposing whatever work you're doing to the wider world. I mean, hopefully everything is locked down, and that great idea that you're working on will not leak out by virtue of the fact that it's going to somebody else's cloud for all that processing. But I'm very happy that Apple is taking this approach. As someone who occasionally works on client stuff that is under NDA or embargo and you can't get it out of there, that fact that you can work everything on your internal machine and not have to go out is very compelling for me. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is asking, do you think Final Cut Pro 11 is going to be a formidable competitor to Resolve?
Jesse Kester.
I believe it already is quite a formidable competitor to Resolve. If you're talking about just color correction, not so much. But if you're talking about editing and efficiency of integration into workflows across large groups of people, yes, it is absolutely a competitor.
Alex Lindsay.
For me, it's not a competitor. They're two different apps and they do two different things for me. So I don't look at them as competing. I look at them as complementary. So I'm using for Fast and Furious, I'm using my Final Cut, and I use it as much as I use Resolve. So I don't have it either way. I will say that for the price of your Premiere subscription for 1 year, you could own both of them forever. I think both of them put a lot of pressure on Premiere because it's you're spending a lot of money on something that both of those do having both of them in your quiver is a pretty powerful set of tools.
I ran the numbers not long ago of how much I haven't spent by being not a subscriber to the Adobe Suite
and there's a lot of things that I still subscribe to Photoshop. I have subscribed to the Substance tools. I'm not right now because I have to make that decision. That's the problem. Here's the problem with subscriptions is that I don't do enough Substance work that I turn it on when I need it and I run it for a couple months and then I turn it off because I'm in a project that makes it work. But do I play with it or try to figure other things out? No, because I can't. Because I'm not going to pay $50 a month for something that I'm not using, most days. And so that's the real issue that Adobe has.
And I will just say that the opportunity cost for me has been that the non-subscription has paid for my last 2 laptops. So that's been nice. Yeah. Jeffrey Powers.
I will say that it's always a seesaw effect. So you'll have Final Cut that just comes out with some new features, and then Resolve comes out with some new features, and then Adobe comes out with some new features that the other ones don't have, and it goes back and forth. So it's always a good idea to stay on top of what's happening. But I do have all 3. I don't own Vegas anymore. That's one that I
Sorry.
So.
Sorry.
Sony's upset about that.
But the whole point is that you want to keep on top of things because you never know if you get into a shop that's all Adobe and they want you to edit in Adobe, you'll have to get Adobe to do it.
Yeah, I think that the number one argument for using Premiere is that other people are using Premiere. And the number one argument for using Avid is that other people are using Avid, but they're not, as far as a feature set between Final Cut and Resolve, there's not that many things that Adobe has that they don't have. I think that the generative AI stuff is pretty interesting that Adobe's doing right now. But do we think that Resolve is going to catch up? Probably, because Resolve has 2 or 3 times as many engineers as Adobe does. so it's that's the big thing is it's very hard to compete with a company that's playing way harder than everybody else. And so that's when you look at the long-term trajectory of Resolve, again, it's never going to be something that is as simple and as fast and as easy to use as Final Cut. It's not in its DNA. But it is, as far as the feature set, it's going to be hard to keeping up with someone that has 3 times the resources that you do.
Absolutely. The other thing I would just mention, and it's just a weird thing, are you interested in working for somebody in a shop, or are you interested in expressing your creative will out into the world? I think the 2 design functions, most of the NLEs other than Final Cut, were created in a world where editing was done in seats and shops and things like that. And the compatibility of finding a group of people who could come into a shop and edit was kind of the prevailing thing. That's what I saw through all those years. What
stuck with me is I was talking to a creator who uses Final Cut, and I said, "So why do you use Final Cut instead of Premiere or whatever?" And he goes, "Because I don't get paid by the hour."
Yeah,
it was just like that quick. It was just like, I don't get paid by the hour. I need things to get done.
Yeah. And I've heard that over and over. In fact, in a lot of the things I was researching, the top creators who were making videos for YouTube, almost all of them said the same thing. I can't afford to slow down by going to one of the other tools because this is so fast from concept to completion. But every editor is going to be different. Every person's going to be different. And so, find the tool that's right for you, that you grok, and dive in and have fun. Next question.
This one's from Ron Kostuic in Toronto, Canada. We do Zoom meetings and often have short videos to play. The share video works, but it is slow to get going. How do we do it better? It would be great if Zoom had a one-button launch and play video feature.
Jesse Kester, what are your thoughts?
You got to get a desktop switchboard and a playback device for your videos. I can't tell you how embarrassing it is when we're in meetings and somebody's trying to get a video up and playing, then they get it up and playing, but there's no audio, then they get the audio up and playing, and it takes 3-5 minutes of and we're just watching them bleed out. It's unacceptable. Get your video up and running efficiently. You want to demo it. This is a confidence game. Your meetings, you're asking favors of people when you're in meetings. You're asking them to be there, to listen to you, to watch you. Don't embarrass yourself like this. Get it working.
Alexander Knight.
Yeah, Jesse covered it. There's lots of great solutions for that, but you're probably going to want some kind of video switcher. and a computer. Playout B is really inexpensive for a software application to play out video. It doesn't do just video, it can do audio as well. But something like Playout B and like a Blackmagic switch or just a small A10 mini or something like that would just make, not only will you look more professional and slick, but it'll solve that problem, that slowness problem, that clunkiness that you're experiencing.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, and if the end thing is to have a switcher, as was mentioned before. I would recommend going to at least a mini extreme. You can get the A10 mini. The extreme is going to give you a lot more inputs, and they're like, switchers are like bags. You'll just keep filling the inputs until, if you get 8 inputs, you'll learn how to use 8 inputs. If you have 4 inputs, you'll learn how to use 4 inputs. So, but you could do a simple thing with, my wife does events, and she's got just the little 8. I got her the little A10 mini to do that with. The best way is to have something that has a HyperDeck interface. It doesn't have to be a HyperDeck. So the shuttle, I have a shuttle here that you can do it. You can get a HyperDeck mini. You can get a HyperDeck if you wanted to. And the advantage of that HyperDeck, if you have an ATEM, is that when you can set it so that when you cut to that input, it starts playing immediately. So now you just push a button and it's going to start playing that out. Playout B will act as a HyperDeck. Softron's on the air will act as a HyperDeck. So they see that HyperDeck protocol and can be done. So Playout B with a small Mac or PC or even a Raspberry Pi is a great way to just have some basic videos that are there. Now, to take this a little bit further, I feel your pain, and I've taken it to another level, which is not just the playout, but I have 4 Mac Minis that sit here. I'm about to add another one for something else, but I have 4 Mac Minis that sit here, and they're all doing different things within my presentation. So when you talk about that presentation, I have one that is doing lower thirds or graphics or anything else that I want to have appear over top. I have another one that is doing, I can cut to an application. So I can cut to an application to show it and talk about it. I have another one that is my PowerPoint presentation, or not PowerPoint, but Keynote presentation. And then I have another one that does the telestration, this thing here. And so I have, those are all stacked into my mixer, my switcher. And the reason I do that is because, and Matt Budd says, by the way, MIDI will also work as a HyperDeck. But the reason that I do that is so it's for the presentations, exactly what you're talking about. I don't have to, not only do I not have to go, I'm going to share my screen, but I also don't have to go, I'm going to jump out of my Keynote and I'm going to jump back in. I just cut away from the Keynote to the app that I want to talk about or to something else that I want to show, and then I cut back to it. And so those are things that I can do very, very fast, and it makes the presentations much tighter than they were before.
And tight is respectful, I will say that. I mean, people are giving you their time. I've been on a couple of webcasts. I was trying to scout around to see what the news was coming out of the Creative Summit. And in a lot of cases, I found myself in some environment on the web where there was just a lot of wasted time. And to me, that's painful, and I just will dive out. I mean, if it's been 2 minutes and I've been somewhere looking for content and I haven't seen anything of value yet, who's got time for that these days? It's very tough. Alexander Knight.
Yeah, and I just want to go quickly back to what Alex said about filling up inputs. I have an A10 Mini Extreme ISO. It's got 8 inputs. I thought there's no way ever I'm going to fill up any, and then suddenly they're all filled, and I go, I really need 12.
Well, and I'm that's why I'm converting to SDI, is because I need more I/O. so like I'm like, there's so many other things I could do if I just had more inputs. Yeah.
Next question.
From the QR code, Trester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. If I were to do an audio recording in a jungle like the Amazon, which insects could possibly be the biggest problem?
I had to laugh at this, and this big word cicadas came into my brain. I don't know if there are cicadas in the Amazon, but if you live in some place that has them, oh my God. Jesse
Kester. Only takes one. It only takes one cicada. It is like, I measured, there was a cicada outside of, when I was trying to do office hours from North Carolina, there was one cicada in the street. 96 dB. Like when I went out with my phone, 96 dB out of that one cicada that was right outside my window. So
we had a hatch in Scottsdale once, and they emerged, and it was deafening.
Yeah.
So next, Jesse Kester. Jesse, dive in.
I'm going to go with mosquitoes, because those will give you malaria, and you won't know when you get it, and symptoms will kick in days later, and you might be alone when the symptoms kick in. We almost lost a family member. They were doing mission work, and somebody found them collapsed by the side of the road and was able to get them to a hospital quick enough to, kind of resurrect them.
Wow.
I'm going with mosquitoes.
Okay, Alexander Knight.
I don't have a list of dangerous insects. I would highly suggest doing some research online, maybe check forums, try to talk to people that have actually done this. I will say you'll probably want to show up with a 32-bit float recording system to ensure you have capture as much dynamic range as possible, and also make sure you have proper rain gear for not just yourself, but also for all of your equipment as well.
Alex, Lindsay.
The biggest problem with malaria is actually that if you get it and then you get back to the United States and no one knows what it is, and you very quickly forget. But two of us have had malaria. I had malaria a couple of years ago, maybe a decade ago, and I got the little version, which means that there's 3 days I don't remember. And it basically went untreated, and then we had somebody else that got it that almost died. It went into kidney failure. So I will agree with Jesse that you should think really hard about when you're talking about malaria, when you're talking about the jungle. Think really hard about mosquitoes and malaria. It's a serious issue.
Yeah, Jack Cannon, the thing said, I would worry about snakes and also get your shots.
Don't
take it lightly.
And snakes.
Next question.
From Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas, comment on the Fujifilm large format Fujifilm GFX ETERNA, its first pro cinema camera.
Yeah, that was interesting. I looked at that yesterday. The external, I think. No, ETERNA. You're right. I'm wrong. Jesse Kester, dive in.
Oh, this is very exciting. I'm really excited about larger formats. We're currently on 35, Super 35, eyeballing full frame. But if we could just skip full frame and go right to medium format, that would be a delight.
Alex Lindsay.
It's a hard market to get into. I applaud them for trying. Let's see how it goes. I mean, they have time to look at what everyone else is doing, but if they miss one marker, they've got Blackmagic on one side, Sony and Arri on the other, Red in the middle of all of that, Canon doing good work as well. It's a really hard market to get into, so it'll be really interesting to see what makes theirs different. So,
Lots of stuff to learn about to come. Next question.
From the QR code, Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. Logic Pro has an update. Does it break anything, or is it a plus and you should get it?
Alexander Knight, what do you think?
I am always now. I'm not a Logic Pro user, and I know Apple's very good with their updates. Typically, they have a much better track record for updates than Avid. But just remember that a lot of us use Pro Tools, and Chester, I'm sure you do use plugins as well. With plugins, you always have to check with the manufacturer to ensure they're supported. So that's what I would caution you. Any third-party software that integrates with Logic, check and make sure it is fully updated. Otherwise, you may run into stability problems.
Alex Lindsay.
If you're doing something important, don't update. You don't update for a long time. If you're just playing around, update immediately. See what happens.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, would it be best to use Final Cut Camera for content being edited in Final Cut and Blackmagic Camera for content being edited in Resolve?
Jeffrey Powers, what say you?
It's always best to use the same brand for one to the other. They do cross over. There are some features that Final Cut Camera will do that only work with Final Cut Pro, Direct Connect, for example, as opposed to importing it into Resolve. For Blackmagic Camera, I haven't seen anything that makes it very specific to Resolve that Final Cut couldn't do. So I think, with the Final Cut, yes, it depends. But with the Blackmagic Camera, it should be pretty seamless. And they want it to be pretty seamless on a lot of these things because you never know what somebody's going to bring in for camera footage that you might need to use.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, I would say that there are three main cameras. I said Kino, which is not Kilo, but Kino. Kino, the Apple camera, and the Blackmagic camera for this kind of shooting. Of course, there's Shoot, which Micah Forrest does, which is a little more of an interactive camera. But for the ones that we're talking about, the big filming cameras, I would say those are the three. And I think it's more for you to decide, does it have the features and does it have an interface that you like? I think that the Blackmagic camera is the most feature rich. Kino has a very clean interface, but has a lot of features as well. And I think the Apple camera is the most streamlined. But I don't feel like right now I have access to all the things that I have on the Blackmagic camera. So those are the things that that's how I would view it. I wouldn't view it as to whether it's integrating with a Final Cut or whether it's Resolve, but the feature set and the interface.
And also, how much time do you have to turn around your projects? I know I've shot a good number of things that came in on B-RAW, or I've shot in B-RAW, and then had to put them in Final Cut to get quick things out. And that extra day to transcode everything from that into ProRes HQ so that I can work with it natively and quickly has been not an issue, but it's a thing.
Do one more question because we have a new person asking a question. I want to make sure we don't miss it for this hour. Let's try to do one more. I know we're going to go over just a little bit.
The Rafat Al-Sayed, yeah.
From the QR code Rafat Al-Sayed in Toronto. Hey, Alex and Courtney, quick question. I'm in a bit of a situation at our small studio. Our new manager comes from film and commercials, which is cool, but he's being put in charge of developing our live production setup and buying all the new equipment.
Ooh, okay. Alex, thoughts, suggestions?
Just remember that 24 frames per second is not used anywhere other than film. Like, it's fine to use it for film, but when people come from film and they ruin our pipelines. So when you go to any social network, it's 30 or 60. when you go to, I think that Canada is also a 30. I don't think it's 25. I think it's a 30 country. I don't remember. But in general, it's just you just want to be thinking about live tools for live production. The biggest problem that we end up getting into when we have film people get in there is, and John Wallace confirmed that it's a 60 hertz country. So it's a 60 hertz. So you're going to see it's 30 or 60. That's the frame rate. I know that he won't like it, but that's the frame rate. And the film and having something making up frames or deleting frames is not the film look. It's just bad video, And so the thing is that you shoot natively in a format that is going to be distributed, so bad. And so the thing is that if you are, if he wants to shoot film, then shoot film. But if otherwise, shoot in a format that you're going to see every frame. And so that's the big thing that I would say that we most run into for film people. The other thing is a lot of film people make everything way too heavy. Like, live is a different thing. And here's the problem you get into is film people will want it to be really, really tight. Film and commercial people will want to tighten everything, but live wants to breathe. Live wants it wants high frame rate. It wants to breathe. It wants to be able to have some movement and some life to it. And usually, what we see is film and commercial people suck all the life out of the show because they just want to program it down into this last little bit, and then they want all their tools to do that as well. And that usually makes it not very fun to watch. So anyway, I think that those are the things that those are the points that I would make. But I would say there is, but I would not produce something, again, unless you own your own CDN, you are producing for a 30 or 60 format, and you're going to be just asking hardware or software to add frames that didn't exist there, and they look bad.
Jesse Kester?
A little sunnier disposition on this side of things, and that is that in film and commercial, you'll find that like the kits that you see are pretty much the same thing every time you go on set. There's like 2 or 3 cameras we see on big budget shows, 2 or 3 lens sets, 2 or 3 shotgun mics we see, and that's I'm at like the edge. That's overestimating how many different bits of kit we see. Live production, it tends to be much more bespoke kits that you build around the needs of the broadcasts that you're doing. So what you'll find is that as you iterate, whatever he's buying in the first round might not be the right thing, but as you iterate and build and push out and push the edges of what you're doing, you'll find that like you're just going to naturally drift away from the inclinations that your producer has as a commercial featured producer. So you'll see that and that's the other thing about live is that it's very iterative. You have to do it a whole bunch of times to get it and to build out your kit and to get the workflow proper. So give it time to grow and time to breathe, and have faith in the process, and ask that your producer do the same.
Alex?
The good news is he won't be asking for 2/3 inch chips. Such trash. Like when you give someone who comes from broadcast, they're like, oh, but it's a Grass Valley. But I'm like, but it's 2/3 inch chip. So the good news that you'll have there is that someone coming from film is going to be not happy with anything less than Super 35, and that's great. Henry Ramos said, tell him to get some FR7s to be happy, and I would agree with that as well.
And just support that person as much as you can, because the pace, the different thinking pathways you use, coming in here 4 years ago and having Alex help me kind of understand live versus the production world I had been in before, I don't think there's a single thing in my brain that works the same way it did back then, because it's just a different thing. When you go live and you have to fill content and you have to do it as smoothly as possible, it's a different skill set than everything I did before, which was plan, acquire, process, deliver, perfect along the way over and over again. All that is out the window when you're going in 3, 2, 1, make a show. And it's just a different mindset. So give everybody time. Hopefully, whoever's in charge will understand that and let the transition take place in its natural time. And I think one of the smartest things Alex ever did was have us do this daily, because that's how we iterated and understood what's not the same anymore in the new environment, because it's not the same. All right. Thank you all for your questions. As always, we will be back tomorrow doing the same thing. Our Talk Traversal today, we've traveled 23,000 miles. That's 38,000 kilometers, 186 million bananas for scale. We'll see y'all tomorrow.
Good show.
Yeah, that was fun.
I wonder how many Mac Mini M4s we sold for Apple.
And can we get a cut of the take? No, the answer is no.
I just want to visit the campus.
It is a beautiful place, having been privileged enough to be able to wander through it 4 times now.
I'm sure Tim Cook is looking at all those office hours referrals.